Good morning. You made it through the first day of training and you're here again. But this is success. I'm Skip Pollack. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and a CASA for over 15 years and a Tai Chi instructor. So part of CASA has part of my heart, and I'm glad to be here with you, and welcome to the family. I'm going to talk to you about trauma and children. Two parts to this. One is some information. And I want to say ahead of time, it's some neurological information, and most of you will know at least most of this, but I want to remind you because it's so critical. And then the second part is hopefully are some tools that you could actually use that will become helpful for you. Let me start with reminding you. On a simplistic level, simplifying the brain a bit, you have 3 levels of brain. The cortex, your rational thinking brain. Underneath that is the limbic system, and that's in essence your emotional brain. And then coming up from your spinal cord is your what's often called reptilian brain, your survival brain. The brain develops like a flower, like anything else, from the inside out. At birth, the cortex, the thinking brain, as you know, is not fully developed. We don't expect infants to be rational. That comes with years. A lot more years than we were told years ago. When I got my doctorate 100 years ago, they were saying that the brain develops about age 8. Now, if you've ever had kids, you've had teenagers, not so much, right? It doesn't really fully develop until about age 22, the early 20s, which you know with teenagers. But here's the key I want to point out. The thinking brain is a different area than the emotional brain. And they work together on when things are good. But you know that. Have you ever been on a diet? And you see these things? And one part of your brain goes, I really want that. And the other part of your brain goes, what? Nah. Yes, no. That kind of civil war. I want to remind you of that because that's a key concept that we're going to be talking about. Here's why. You are programmed. Nature has pre-programmed you that under stress, under threat, the emotional brain takes over. Literally for about, round numbers, 45 seconds, but anywhere from 30 to 70 seconds in there. You literally can't access the thinking brain. Nature has pre-programmed you so that you will survive. And we often call that fight or flight. It's really fight, flight, or freeze. We'll talk about that a little. But it's pre-programmed in. That's why people who have anxiety disorders have such a difficult time, because most people will try and tell them, well, stop reacting. You can't. You don't have conscious control. What you can do is work with and learn how to deal with the results of that, and then you can kind of damp them down that way. But real important that you know, the fight or flight, when something happens, when something is thrown at your head, you don't say, oh, looks dangerous, I better duck. What do? You react. You react. So important to remember, stress, trauma makes you react. You think later. So, part of the limbic brain, the limbic system, 2 things to note. I just talked about the amygdala here. That's the fear center. When the amygdala gets started, gets kicked up, that's when you get fear, that's the fight or flight, and that's when you get shaky and you have all sorts of biological reactions going on. The other thing that happens in there, interesting, Mother Nature is so interesting. She has also put your hippocampus in the limbic system. The hippocampus is where you process memories. So, your memory is more emotional than it is rational. Think back about the things that you remember. There are events that have meaning to you. My suggestion is that's why you've forgotten, at least I have so much of what I went to school with. It's like, okay, I took a test, it's all gone, but the emotional stuff is there. Trauma makes an impact. Your brain is programmed to survive. So it is pre-programmed to pick out negative. One of the brain specialists calls it a negative bias. Because if you're out in the wild, you need to know what the danger is to survive. What's good is nice, but that's okay. Survival is key. Can you see that? So if you're in a dangerous, wartime, abusive environment, you are hyperactive and you're picking that up and it's making a huge impact. and it's making an impact on the emotional survival level, not rational. You can talk about it maybe later, but sometimes not. Sometimes you can't explain it. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Does that make sense to you biologically? The reason, and I know you sort of know this, but I'm kind of hammering a bit, is we sometimes treat these kids like they've made a decision to have strange behaviors or strong emotions, or they're acting bad because they have a no. This is real brain stuff beyond personal control at this level. Okay. Here's the other thing that happens under extreme stress, trauma, is, we're made to react. Acute trauma. Something happens, and then we're supposed to relax. Something goes on. When you have been in an abuse, which is a war zone, what happens is you don't get that normal up-down flow. You get stuck up. And then when you go down, you get stuck down. So it looks kind of bipolar, if you will. And no coincidence of using bipolar the way we diagnose bipolar, which gets overdiagnosed, by the way. But what happens is you just get stuck. And have you ever done something in a position so long, your muscles get, bad news is it happens more and more as you get older. But somehow you get stuck. Same kind of phenomenon. And it's hard to get off. So these kids are going to look horribly emotional. And they are, not because they're being bad. We're talking about if you can have attitude, who wouldn't afterwards, but look at what's going on. And that's what we expect from a brain. That's what the brain was made to do. The reason I want you to know this is nobody told these kids that. No one told them how to spell neurology. They don't know what a cortex is. And when you're feeling out of control, it is the most terrible, scary feeling. Can you think back to a time in your life where things were going on and you didn't feel like you were in control? Isn't it horrible? So they're having these reactions and they don't get it. And nobody's told them about it. And they think, and here's a key thing that's going to happen to kids under trauma, bad families, something's wrong with me. I'm really weird bad. And that doesn't help. But they don't know what's happening. But you got the biology of what's going on here? BJ, Elizabeth, Dr. Jacobs always talks about Bruce Perry, and so do I, because he's kind of the father of dealing with children with abuse. This is one of his charts. And the bottom line is, the stronger the emotion, remember those 3 levels of the brain? The lower the level of the brain that's reacting to it. So when I'm very calm, I have a niece who says, when everything's going my way, I'm charming as can be. Well, yes, aren't we all? The stronger the emotion is, especially negative emotion, the lower the brain level. When you've got a kid who's terrified, they're working purely from a primary primitive brain. Sometimes they're not even going to understand language. Let me take it on a non-pathological level. Have you ever been so angry? You have if you worked, right? At something somebody did, and you started to type or started to say something, and hopefully part of your brain said, wait! But it's like, and then afterwards you say, whoa, that was it. You know what I'm talking about then. Just exaggerate it a little more, because the situation is exaggerated and kids don't have the same experience. This chart said in words. If you are under trauma, if you've been traumatized, you're not even processing the words anymore. If, hypothetically, someone were right here, and I'm talking, you notice I use my hands a lot, to a kid, I could really scare them. Because, look at this. That's sort of what I did, didn't it? I'm trying to learn to be calm and cool and sophisticated, but it's not working so good. They pick up on nonverbals. So if something has scared the kids, say in a school setting, and someone is moving or there's nonverbals that are going on, the kid is distracted from the class and they're paying attention to that, because those of us who grew up in abusive, dysfunctional families know you better be checking out the grown-ups, and you better check that face. We get radar, because if they're angry, you need to be out of there. because it's not going to be good for you. It doesn't matter what you did or didn't do. If they're angry, if they're under the influence, if something is going bad. So you learn to watch. The same way as our military learn to watch for other signs. It's the same darn stuff. And it is PTSD. We'll talk about that, but do you get the idea? So nonverbals, so a fearful child. Therefore, when you're with your kid, if something happens, if you do something, or if you see a reaction, don't take it personally. Assume it was probably a reaction that happened, and your job is to first calm you down. And then we'll talk about some other things. But don't take it personally. Here's the bottom line. Trauma is bad for your brain. It's bad chemically, and it's bad structurally. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. Take a look at the difference in those brains. You can see, you don't have to be a neurosurgeon to see on the right that that cortex is shrunken and it has more fissures in it. Take away brain area and we know that's not good. That really does happen in extreme cases to kids. For children, I'm going to answer your question in a second. Yes, they can recover. But, here's the but that I want you to. You can't recover in the same kind of stress thing that caused it. You have to be in and have some comfort and safety to recover. You, we CASAs, are part of the safety valve and are more important than most people realize. But they can't be in the middle. I can't get safe in the same environment I got scared in. And again, you don't have to be able to read the PET scans too much, but you can see in the abused brain, notice that areas are darkened because when something is overactive, remember that chart that went up, got stuck up and then down? When you get overreactive, it just closes down. Have you ever been in a situation where things were going on bad, maybe the death of a loved one, a breakup of a romance, something that happened, and finally you just numbed out? It's nature's way of stopping pain. The problem with numbing out is you don't just numb and close out the bad stuff. You numb out and close out everything, even the good stuff. But that's the brain literally physiologically shutting down. So all of this is to remind you what you already know, but to remind you as strongly as I can. Trauma is physiological, it's neurological. Their brains have been affected. They can recover. Recovery and health in the brain can repair, but they need help, and the reactions are going to last a much longer time than people realize, and especially when they don't know what's happening, and kids don't. So that's the background information to remind you. And again, I know most of you know this kind of information, but it's so important to be reminded. Behavioral effects. That's the neurology. So what happens as a result of this? PTSD. As Dr. Jacobs said, you're not going to find a lot of diagnoses of PTSD, which I think is clinically criminal. One reason is it's a hard diagnosis to make. Another is we don't have immediate, snap, quick cures for it. At one point, a couple of years ago, I went through CASA records. I was going through with some of the CASA stuff. And we estimated that about 85% of the kids in the system are diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Come on. That just doesn't even make sense. But I want you to think about how you feel or you act when you're nervous. Can you stand real still when you're nervous and you don't pay real attention? Aha! ADHD, and what can I do then? Medicate you. And we've medicated these kids, my opinion, criminally. Horribly. I've seen kids just have their heads, fall over and start drooling. It's not usually that bad, but seriously. But that makes them controllable. If you get a file that you look at and you see ADHD, don't fight the system right now, but put me on your shoulder. Okay? You got a picture of me? Put me on my shoulder. Photoshop me. Okay. And what I want you to remember is don't pay attention to diagnoses. Don't pay attention to that diagnosis right now. That's too done. It doesn't mean anything. It may mean the kid was scared. Who wouldn't be? So with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, they've been in an uncontrollable situation and the brain reactions that I've just told you about are happening. It isn't just me saying this. This chart comes from Center for Disease Control, CDC. Notice that military veterans, about 30%, that's 1/3 of our vets are probably suffering some PTSD, whatever your politics. Don't care about that, but I want you to know we are not treating these folks right. They are not getting the treatment they need. Abused kids, it is estimated that 50%, and you're not going to see that diagnosis. So assume they've got PTSD. You don't need to have a stamp on it to diagnose it. Assume it because I'll tell you about some of the behavior. The reason I want you to know about this is their behavior will then make sense to you. And if their behavior makes sense to you, you can help it make sense to them and you can help them cope. That's where the toolkit comes in. PTSD, what happens is emotional reactivity. You're hyper. You're just overreactive. You know you're vigilant because things have happened, so you have to be aware, so you're always on. And if you're always on, have you ever been in a situation, even short time, where you had to be just on? One, it's exhausting. And number two, you can't go off. My husband does volunteer work with the police. He's been doing work with cold case for 8 years now, and he talked about some training with the police. One of the problems the police have is, especially these days, because they're all on the street by themselves now, you have to obviously be aware. And they come home and they are so exhausted that they go from up to like a vegetative state. And they just need to veg with maybe a beer or a soda or something in front of the TV. And that's real hard on the families. So they're trying to train the families and the police officers to kind of understand that. But that's what we're talking about here. You're hypervigilant. You're over-aware. The other thing you try to do is avoid situations, people, things that will remind you of the pain, but it really is hard because you're not sure what you're avoiding, and they keep coming through. Flashbacks. This is what? End of February. Do you remember what you were doing for Christmas? Take a second. I want you to remember one really positive thing. Got a positive thing? Okay, piece of cake. Where are you? You're here. Remembering a positive thing because you're being nice, and that's what the instructor said. That's a memory. A flashback is not a memory, but it's a re-experiencing it. You're not sitting here remembering it. You've jumped over and you're reliving it. Whether it's a rape, a murder, something that happens, or the abuse, or the war. You are there. Physiologically, your body is shaking. You're sweating. You can't talk right. All of those physiological reactions actually are happening. And that's why they're so horrible and terrible. Some are predictable. They're cued by the environment. Vets who were over in Afghanistan and Iraq had a harder time coming home to Phoenix than they did to, say, Minnesota. Why? The heat and the kind of landscape that had some similarities. So something comes in, and remember, at a lower level of brain, they react much stronger. So it can be a color. So other of them, we don't know. We're really just starting to get some good research on trauma, but some of it just comes back for reasons that you just don't know. Imagine being a kid, and you're sitting there, and all of a sudden, it's like someone popped you in the face. And your heart is going, your head is going, it's scary as can be. And you feel weird. Nothing worse than being weird and different as a kid. Intrusive thoughts are that. Often with kids, this will come in the form of nightmares. The younger they are, the more the nightmares. So ask about nightmares. And nightmares are they're scary for anybody. They're particularly scary for these kids. And what happens is you have ongoing anxiety of what's going to happen next, and I'm scared and I don't know what's going on. I would have ongoing anxiety being in a foster care home myself, much less all of the rest of the things that are going on. So look at all of the stuff that's going on with someone who has PTSD. It's a scary, scary situation, and nobody's really talked much to them about it. And that's where you can come in. The second problem, expect to find, is what we kind of call it a fancy way, emotional dysregulation. But what that is a lack of emotional control. No one expects a baby, a young child, to have emotional control. You learn that as you grow up, and you learn that by having parents, by having loved ones, by some help, and being safe. These kids didn't have a role model. No one said to them, "Oh, John, that must have, oh, I'm so, let's kick that tree back. Let's take a deep breath. In other words, coping tools. They didn't have parents to teach them anything, so they get these strong emotions and don't know what to do with them. So they're going to act. Strong emotions are going to lead to strong behaviors. Duh. And they're going to do things, and somebody's going to say, some well-meaning but untrained rational adult is going to say, Tom, why did you do that? What answer are you going to get? I don't know. They're telling the truth. They're telling the truth. I don't know. They don't know how to say, I had emotional dysregulation in my brain, got stuck in a limbic system hyperactivity mode, and I didn't have any rational control. So when they say, I don't know, translate it into that. They're telling the truth. I don't know. It just happened. And now I'm embarrassed. So helping them control some emotions is something we'll talk about a little bit. But they've done this a couple times, so now on top of everything else, they not only know, don't think but know, that I'm unloved. Those of us who were abused, had dysfunctional families, know we were not loved. A couple reasons. One, we were told that. It was real clear. If it weren't for you, everything would be fine. We're stuck with you. Look what a mess you are. They also say things like, look what you made me do. It's all your fault. If you were. So you know that you're terrible and dumb. And you look around. And you look at everybody else. There's a wonderful expression called, don't judge your insides by somebody else's outsides. You've heard that, right? But you have to get old to know that. You're looking around, and you all look like you're normal and you're loved. And so the abused kid says, what is so horrible with me that they couldn't even like me? What is so horrible with me that they hurt me? How bad can I be? What emotions is that going to cause? Sadness? A little bit of anger? You bet. But dare I show the anger? Not in an abusive situation. You do not dare show that to abusive adults. That phrase, I'll give you something to cry about, I'll give you something to shout about. So kids who have been in that abusive situation have to hush up and stuff it in. And you know how good that feels, to stuff in that anger. So they've got anger sitting in there that they don't dare share. Just a sideways. I was in private practice for about 30 years. My clinical specializations are depression, anxiety, and of course abuse survivors. Go figure. And this was a woman who was talking about her child. She said, Dr. Skip, my daughter said she hated me. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. And she said, you shrinks. What do you mean that's wonderful? I said, she felt safe enough. Because if you're my mom and I say, I hate you, that means I have to feel comfortable that you're not going to say what back? I hate you too. You're going to say, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm still your mother, and you still are grounded, and I love you very much, and right? All that stuff. So they felt safe enough. I would never have said that because I knew that I was this much away from being sent away anyway. So they've got all these emotions boiling inside of them, and they don't know how to cope with them. They don't know what they are. They don't know what to do. And that makes you, which makes me look hyperactive. So drug me. Can you see this terrible vicious cycle we've gotten into? Okay, you knew this. I'm a Tai Chi teacher. I see some tension. Roll your shoulders. You've been sitting in those chairs for a while. Just roll your shoulders a little bit, your neck, your shoulders. Yeah. Okay, reminder, again, on the lack of emotional control. Well, remember I talked about the amygdala? What some of the brain people are talking about when that fight or flight system comes in is amygdala hijack. It like pulls the brain and you have either a flashback or a strong emotional reaction. Remember, these are not consciously done. This is what happens to people with panic disorder. Of all the anxiety disorders, panic disorder is the worst. A panic attack is horrible. There's some research that estimated about 50% of the people who got taken to the ER over the weekend thinking it was a heart attack. It was really a panic attack. That's how physical and serious it is. And you never know when it's coming for some of these folks. So you can imagine this kind of fear and this walking around, and it's kind of scary. So these kids have strong emotions, don't know how to control them. They're bubbling up in there, and sometimes they get triggered off, and I don't have any control. Scary, scary. Those are the two big behavioral things. Think of it as PTSD and lack of emotional control. Some of it biological, some because nobody was there to say, wow, when you feel this way, here's something to do. That's where you're going to be able to help. The goal, the goal for helping someone who's out of balance is finding balance. But here's what I want you to hear. Telling someone to calm down is not a good strategy. Have you ever been upset? I'm sure for a good cause and with reasonable, and someone said, why don't you calm down? Yeah. Now I'm angry and homicidal. Just not good. On a biological level, you're trying to talk to a rational thing with the primitive brain reacting. So what you're trying to do is help them calm their bodies down. If your body can calm, your brain can calm. Okay? Bodies and brains are connected. But giving a lecture, telling them, trying to be rational in the middle of an emotional situation will only make it worse. Because when the stronger the emotion, remember, the less the rational brain is involved, the less the rational brain, the less I can understand. So sometimes you're going to be yapping at me and I'm going to hear yada, 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 and not even get it, and that's going to even make me more upset. We're going to work with calming down the body. And you know that intuitively, because some of you have said to yourself, let me take a deep breath here. Let me take a walk. Let me do this. You know everything I've told you, just not in these words. And I'm reminding you of how wise and wonderful you are, because that's the stuff you're going to be able to pass on to your CASA kid. Here's just some of the common symptoms to expect, and they're everything we talked about. Shame is a big one. Can't really talk about it for a while. Trust issues, of course. Dr. Jacobs talked about that specifically. But the key I want you to know is just the anxiety and sometimes the dissociation. If I've numbed myself off, which is like nature putting a scab on you from pain, it's hard to reconnect. So when you see some of these kids, sometimes they'll look like they're not connecting with you, or they'll look like they've disconnected. Give it a break. It's not about you. It's about them getting some space, because relationships haven't been so good for them before, so relationships are scary. What you're going to do is go slow and change that perception, because you're going to be a CASA who's there. You're the angels. But first off, that dissociation. There's an epidemic that you probably know about of cutting around, especially girls, but boys are doing it too. Huge amounts of cutting. Almost always it has to do with dissociation, has to do with numbing. People cut. They'll say, when I've talked to these kids, they either cut to feel more or to feel less. I've had kids say to me, I'm not sure I'm alive. So when I cut and I see the blood running, I know I'm alive. My secret belief is I think that's why kids love zombie stuff so much. Because no one has talked about how kids dissociate a lot. Normal kids do too. They just can come back and they know it. Other kids, they cut it to stop the pain. Said, I'm feeling so much pain that a physical thing centers you, focuses you, and it's easier to cope with the physical pain than psychological. So it's all about a bad attempt to modulate emotions and get control of emotions, and that's a theme. That's the theme I want you to know. Biologically, these kids have been in such horrible situations that they're not in control of their emotions. Nobody would be, at whatever age. And nobody's told them about it, and they don't have a secure post family to take care of that. So they've got all of these strong emotions going, and it's scary. Scary as can be. Make sense? And you knew this, right? You did a bit. I knew you. Okay. One other just quick note to put: emotional versus physical abuse. Physical abuse tends to be cyclical. You may have seen one of those cycles of, and there's almost always a honeymoon makeup period or a period when things calm down. Emotional abuse, on the other hand, tends to be unrelenting, tends to be day after day after day after day. I have my bestie friend. We've been friends for 20 years. So we were talking about something, and she had a really terrible father. And he used to always tell her how dumb she was. And she turned out, she had some bad years in there, and she turned out fine, and she was a professor of religious studies. And I was a psychology professor, and our offices were in the same area. And we got to be good friends. She's a wise and wonderful woman. She really is. And she said to me, you know, my father, she was grown up and had kids of her own and had gotten past all that. But she says her father had a stroke and couldn't speak. And she said, you know what the first thing that came to her mind was? You can never tell me how dumb I am again. See how deep that stuff is and how long-lasting. I have one friend who says, if it's hysterical, it's historical. Family of origin, early stuff, has such strong impact. And if you're a victim of emotional abuse because of the words and the thing, you blame yourself because that's what's told. Look what's wrong with you. And that leads to all the self-esteem problems, of course. Summary of the section we just talked about. When you're in trauma, you're working out of your lower brain. You're working in survival needs. You're going to be overly emotional and not have control over those emotions. And you're going to often be just overwhelmed with anxiety. So if you remember that and you remember it's biological, it's not willful. Let's talk about a toolkit. So hopefully some things you can use and do. Everybody is nervous about those first meetings. I was. I'd been in private practice for 25 years and all the rest, and I was having my first meeting with my CASA kid, and I was nervous as could be, because it's a whole different thing. So what I talk about is the 3 S's: slow, safe, and structured. This is new to them. Keep it slow. Keep it easy. For one thing, all of you are now almost there. Hang in there. Going to be CASAs. Did you tell some of your friends that you're going to go for CASA training? And did they say, what is a CASA? And did you try to explain it? Did you find that it just floated off your lips? It's hard to explain, isn't it? But find some way of explaining it. They won't get it right away, but find some way of saying, here's who I am and here's what it's going to be. Go slow, start easy. I'd recommend no more than 20 minutes for your first visit, because that's a lot of time. Think of going to the dentist. 20 minutes can be long. And you're a grown-up. I happen to know you're wonderful, because that's what CASAs are. They don't know that you're another grown-up from the system. So a short visit, set up a schedule. Keep it nice and simple. And then here's the key. Stick to it. If you say you're going to call every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, when do you need to call? Wednesday at 3. 3:15 is not 3. As Dr. Jacobs said, nobody has kept their word. Nobody has stayed with this kid. That's what's going to differentiate you. So don't make promises you can't keep, and keep it simple. So start with a schedule. Kids like structure. We all do. We like structure. We like habits. That's a safety element. So create some structure. Here's when I'll pick you up. And you can always change the structure, but have some kind of structure. Here's what I'll do. I'll pick you up. Maybe we can go to lunch. Maybe, and it's going to depend on the age. So I'll get into that in a second. But create something that works for you. I'd also put an extra phone call in at least once. If you're going to go, whatever your schedule is. At the beginning, I'd try once a week for a short visit if you can, or every other week. But certainly a call in there, scheduled call. Just to say, hey, how's it going? Just wondered. And you're not going to get a lot of answers back. Fine. Okay. You know that. You got your kids, for heaven's sakes. But you have made the effort and you've reached out. What they give back is not the issue. It's you connecting. I said I'd connect. I'm here. I'm connecting. Just to remind you, I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. It'll make a difference. In those first conversations, people often get nervous about those and don't know what to talk about. Don't make it therapy. One, people don't like therapy. You go to therapy to get better. It's not fun. Second, you don't have the confidentiality that you can have in therapy. Keep it easy. Keep it open-ended. Think of the last time you were with a good friend. You probably didn't discuss earth-shattering things, unless it was politics or something. But keep it just, that's the way people relate, kind of open-ended. Find out about them. Ask them. Some of them will want to tell you about things. Great. Listen. Others won't. They need to have their time. It'll take a while for them. Here's the only guideline. Don't reassure them. Don't say, it'll all be fine. Oh my gosh, please don't say that. I'd recommend never saying that to anybody, unless you know them real well. Because you don't know if it's going to be real fine. You have no control of that. You don't know. And everybody's told them that. And it's been a lie. Look where they are. It's not been fine. So what I want you to do is connect. Connect with them emotionally. And you do that by going, whoa, oh my gosh. Now, here's your script to memorize. Are you ready? You probably have better words, but if everything else falls out of your head, memorize this. Bummer. Okay, you got that? Bummer. Whoa. Depending on the age, that sucks. Wow, that must have been difficult. And you know what you tend to hear? Yes! All of a sudden, you're connecting. Think of the last time you had a problem. You didn't want someone coming in with the 17 solutions to it, right? You know, that men are from Mars, women are from Venus stuff. What you wanted was someone to say, Janine, that is not fair. Yeah. And that's the connection. So your job, you're not solving it right now. Your court report, that area is going to be, when you're with the kid, you want to connect. Oh, that just sucks. One of the ways, not the first meeting, but there are some books out there that can often help. I don't know any of these authors, and they're all through, you can get them all through Amazon. Don't buy all of them, buy things when you think, but just to show you, because they're like the little golden books. I love this one. A terrible thing happened to me in this little possum. And you never do find out exactly what happened to the poor little possum. But a terrible thing happened, and as a result of that, I feel this way and that way. And you can read it to a kid, and they'll go, yeah! And if they're old enough, they may want to keep it. Even if they can't read it, they may want to keep it. There's something very validating about knowing I'm not the only one. Come on, you've all been in a situation, haven't you, where something happened and someone else very honestly went, that happened to me. Really? You acted like that? Yeah. So, I mean, that's one example. I love this one because it's obvious what it's about. Murphy's 3 homes. Murphy's the rescue dog that, of course, got taken back 2 times. Who can be in the foster care system and not relate to that? This sneaks in a happy ending. And the other one, and I have a bunch of others, but the little ones I had to show you. Maybe Days. A book for children in foster care. Because no one gives them any good information. You're going to be frustrated because it takes 6 months to get to court and all the rest. But this, again, all of this is just saying, validate their emotions. They're going to be scared. Well, I would be too. I was angry. Well, who wouldn't be? I'm really upset. Yeah, I understand. I'm angry. Yep. You know what I mean? Don't do it in a phony way. I'm acting out and sounding phony, but you know what I mean. That's what's more important. Don't reassure them. It's not that it'll get better. What you're saying is, I'm with you. That's your message. I'm here. Even if things get rocky. Isn't that a wonderful message? That's the message we all want. Someone is here. Some specific tools. Some ideas. And toolkit tool number 1, body awareness. People, when they get upset, when they're nervous, they need to get back in touch with your body. What trauma does is take you out of your body into this shell. So any way you can get them moving. I find it so amazing that as we're cutting down on education, what we're cutting out first is phys ed. You sat in chairs, and these are fairly comfortable. Can you imagine being a 6-year-old and sitting in a chair for 6 hours? Especially boys. Boys are not wired for that. Men aren't either. But boys in particular, there's a reason why so many boys are diagnosed more with ADHD than girls, because they're not supposed to be sitting there. So if you can get them involved in any kind of sports, that would be great. That's where when you talk to the teachers, when you first go around and do interviews, talk to the teachers, see what's available in the schools, maybe see what's available in a Y. If you can get them, especially in team sports, that would be super. Because it does 2 things. It has the socialization. They belong somewhere. Teams are just so important. And doing something. If nothing else, I have it in yellow. Dancing. You can always dance. And dancing is one of the best things in the whole world. Dance with them. I know we won't like their music. There's nothing that will show you your age as much as hearing kids' music, right? Dance with them. Have them dance. Have them move. How many of you have gone to a yoga class? Everybody goes to yoga class. Take them to a yoga class. If you can't take them, show them yoga. Make it up. Buddha listening. Warrior prince. Sun rising. I'm Tai Chi, I'm not, do you know what I mean? Anything that has body awareness is just so powerful. Breathing, of course. As your breath goes, there's where your emotions go. Most people hold their breath a lot. You're not breathing. So do me a favor, take some nice deep breaths. Belly breathing. Now, if you are like me, ladies of a certain age, you were told a horrible lie. Excuse me, it's called Lamaze, right? They so lied. They say just breathe like that and the pain will be gone. But the principle that they were using was correct. Here's an interesting thing. When you tell people to take a deep breath, they usually focus on the in-breath. That activates your sympathetic or your up system. An out-breath activates your parasympathetic, which is your relax and recover system. So in fact, you'll naturally breathe in. But do a couple with me. And a good pattern is one with real drama. One with a little less drama. And one, it's a nice quick fix. Bubbles. For little kids, you can get them in the dollar store. Blowing bubbles. It has that out breath. And then one of the things you can put in their head as a hack, as the kids would say, if you don't have your bubbles there and you're getting nervous, pretend you have your bubbles and go. Then you don't have to stand here and lecture about the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. But deep breathing out. Any kind of slow movement with counting. If you need someone to get anchored, when someone is panic, remember, they can't think, but you almost never lose your ability to count. So one of the things I recommend, here's a magic. Kids love magic. Make it magic. Okay, here's a magic formula that I'm entrusting you with my magic formula. You take 5 steps and you count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many of these am I going to do? 5 steps of 5. Easy. Nice and slow and counting. Physiologically, what's going on is you've allowed that adrenaline to come down. The fight or flight system takes, remember I said about 30 seconds. What I've just done for you will take about 45 seconds. You'll be able to relax, and counting keeps you grounded. That's why almost all obsessive compulsives count, because that's an anxiety disorder, and counting grounds you. It becomes a disorder when you overdo it, of course. But any kind of movement, slow movement with counting, make it up, make it magic, make it, this is what Harry Potter did, here's, what Professor Snipes does. Any way you want to do it, but make it easy. Here's another one. Hands, go with breathing. And count the breaths. One of the good things, you can't always move. You can put your hands under your desk and do that. So when you get nervous anywhere, you don't call attention to yourself. You can do that. One more easy one, take your writing hand. Okay? Come on, take your writing hand. And like you remember when you go to those stores where they, well, I guess in 3rd grade, where you did a turkey, draw around. Very slowly, draw around. And then come back. You are physically doing slow motion. You're not actually counting on this one. But the time it takes to do that is that timeout calm. You can't just say to someone, take a timeout calm. Especially a kid. You can say, draw your hand. I've done this for a number of cases, and I was in a meeting one time with some people I knew, and I saw somebody sitting there doing that. And they went, yes, yes. Very calm way to do. Do you see what I mean? Little tricks, little tips. That's what loving parents give. These kids, by definition, didn't have that. That's the kind of thing that when you give them, that's the kind of gift that magnifies. That's the gift of how do I cope? How do I go forward? And that's what these toolkit gifts are about. So you've got the first tool idea, work with the body. Get them to move. When they tell you they're upset, when they can't tell a story, tell them to move, talk about it. If it's a little boy, my grandson one time was very upset. I said, Corey, I know can you really run all the way to the wall? I know you're upset. Can you go down? Of course I can. Show me. Well, come on back. Could you do that again? Get some of that, get the energy moving from them. Everybody else is telling them what? Sit still. They always do that to little kids. Sit still, I can't talk to you when you're moving. I want you to say, move! And move with them. That's the healthy thing. Bessel van der Kolk is now the guy, the man in trauma. And he's talking about working with the body. The body keeps the score. And he says the most important thing is for people to find a sense of safety in their bodies. When you're in trauma, you're not safe in your body. So all of this is just emphasizing. He thinks that talking therapy, as a matter of fact, can be very harmful. A lot of controversy about that. There's no controversy at this point on how much we need to include the body. And a lot of therapists don't do that. People are always just talking to heads, especially kids. They're mostly bodies. The other reminder is rhythm. There's something about rhythm, and that's why dancing, music, people almost intuitively do that. When they do the when people are thumbing or doing something when they're nervous, when they're without realizing trying to calm themselves down, they will do it with rhythm. I've seen people do it with their teeth, with their mouth, with their hand. So give this to the kid as, a coping technique when there's rhythm. Rhythm is soothing. So any kind of rhythm, and that's why, again, dancing, but any kind of movement that you're doing, as you're doing just rhythm. Okay? Whatever. And I'm doing all of this to emphasize this because in our culture, it's like we've forgotten that. We forgot that kids are bodies. And the bodies is where the healing will start. Not the head. It goes from the body up. There's something called emotional freedom technique, EFT. I have a little handout for you, a little thing there. You can go online and get everything free. Don't be paying lots of money for this, but there's lots of books. Tapping has become really known. Some people talk about it as like an acupressure or acupuncture for the emotions. There's a couple of different ways to do it, but I'm going to ask you to follow me in a tapping routine. Do me a favor, just relax for a second. Take some breaths, in and out. Feel the out breath. Now I want you to take your finger at the top of your head, and I want you to tap and say, I'm breathing out. Do it again, I'm breathing out. Sides of your eyes. I'm breathing, and I'm here. I'm breathing, and I'm here. Underneath in the middle of your eyes, which is actually very good for sinuses. I'm breathing, and I'm here. Under the nose. One hand under the nose. I'm breathing. And you need to keep saying that because you'll forget to breathe. We all forget to breathe. I'm breathing. See, you forgot to breathe until I told you, huh? Thank you for being human. Chin. I'm breathing. V-bone, where the collarbone comes in. Two hands, I'm breathing. And now the lymph nodes, about 5-6 inches under the armpit, right where your bra line is for women. One side, you're breathing, right? I'm breathing. Other side, I'm breathing. And then the karate chop part of your hand, I'm breathing. I'm breathing. I'm an okay kid. And you throw that energy away. Some people swear by it. I like it as a technique. In Tai Chi, there's something called low hand tapping that the Chinese have been doing we do this, for 5,000 years. And it involves, tapping seems to be a terribly powerful way of actually getting the body moving. And what it is a wonderful tool. If I don't know what to do and I'm scared, I can tap. And it gets me back to my body. So even if it doesn't, technically, if it's a Hawthorne effect, and I'm not sure if it works physiologically, but I've seen it work, it is a tool. And we all need tools for when we feel out of touch. So that's a lovely tool. Now, don't be teaching all of this like the second day, or they'll think, it's a lecture class. There's a bunch of books, Tapping Anxiety Away, tapping. Again, most of them are like this. This one is how the wizard made the yuckies go away. He had the yuckies, and he was doing this, the wizard, and he thought, oh, I feel better. So he came up with the whole thing. So for kids. Yes, ma'am.
It really does work. I do it with my children, and my son, who's a skeptic, before class, or, he's got a test, we do the anxiety, I'm going to do good, and under the limp, and he said, Mom, it actually works. So,
I'm so glad to hear that. Because when you first hear it, you go, really? But trust me, one, it works for actually solving it, and two, if nothing else, the problem with anxiety is it makes you anxious. So it's like hitting a fire alarm, and you keep hitting it and hitting, oh my gosh, I'm anxious, oh my gosh, I'm scared, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget it. That's what tests anxiety. I used to watch students practically screw themselves into the ceiling with it. You've got to break that pattern, and if it does nothing else, it breaks that thinking pattern. I'm here, I'm fine. So that was all in terms of the first tool of this, is to tie you into being in touch with your body and a number of techniques. And I'm sure you have other ones too. But that's the number one toolkit thing I want you to do. Think about getting someone back into their body when they're scared. Then the second thing is make them aware of their emotions. What's going on? What are they feeling? Little kids often don't know, and no one's told them. It's hard enough when you're an adult to know the difference. So having a name, having something to do, makes a difference. We used to have a sign in our office. To tame it, you have to name it. Let me give you an illustration. Have you ever gotten a call back from your doctor after you've had some labs or some tests, and they say, we need to have some more tests? And you go, why? He says, well, things are inconclusive. We're not sure what's going on. We need more tests. How long did it take you before you had your obituary written in your head? Because obviously it's stage 4 cancer that's going to go in 6 days. But that's called catastrophizing, and it's a very human kind of thing. So if you can name something, it really does make it better, but kids don't know how to name it. So there's a tool called Zones of Regulation, and this is a fun thing. And this is where there's a handout right on your table that looks like this. And you don't need to use the handout with your kids. This is just to illustrate it to you. Kids, most people didn't take a Psych 101 class where they can tell the difference and tell you the name. Oh, I've got anxiety. No, I've got a little bit of fear. I've got this. I've got attachment distress. What they often know, though, and it's intuitive, the colors seem to correspond for them, at least in this culture. So if I say to you, I'm really red, what kind of feelings would you guess I'm feeling? Anger, upset, boom. So obvious. And yellow, a little bit cautious. I'm feeling green. Everything is green and blue is a little bit. So instead of having them try to do a dialectic, remember for years ago they had those pictures of faces, but that didn't help you much. Ask them, what color are you? Now you can do this with animals too, but I think the color is just kind of helpful. So I'm going to ask you for a moment and say, hypothetically, I want you to think of some things, because you already know this. So here's where we do the exercise part. I'm going to give you a color in a table and ask you to get together and come up with, if I said to you, I was in that color, and I'm 7, what are some things you would tell me to do? Okay, red. What are some things? I'm 7 and I'm feeling red. What are some things?
Just sit and listen to them and say for a slow walk.
A walk.
Change the subject maybe to something unrelated to that. That might work.
Okay. Anything else?
Let them know you're there for them. Be a constant. Possibly remove them from the situation.
Okay. So it's back to kind of what Betsy, you were saying, some validation. If you don't know what else to say, wow, you're angry, you're scared, I got it. Bummer, or I got it, I'm still here. And okay, yellow, what are some things?
We talked about being in a state.
Oh yeah, thank you.
We discussed it and looked at it that perhaps they're yellow because they're in a state of constant worry. Mm-hmm. So we talked about some techniques, the drawing of the hand. We really liked it because we thought that's something they can do in school and not look weird. Yes. And not get yelled at for being wiggly. And if it's pervasive or if it's continuous with the child, then perhaps looking at some activity that they can do as some maintenance technique. Excellent. So sports or dancing, the things that you mentioned, so that they can get out of their head
and do
something active and hopefully calm the head.
That's the theme. You got it exactly. Anything else that falls out from whatever you do is secondary. That doesn't matter. It's the doing. Yes. What? Red. Oh, I went this way. Okay, sorry. Oh, sorry. Out of my bubble. Some more red.
Again, we talked about validating the feelings initially, and then movement, breathing.
Breathing, moving. Stomping is fine. Dancing. Were you blue or green?
We're blue table.
Blue.
Talking blue depression. We're talking about blowing bubbles, exercising, going outside, sunshine, Play-Doh silly putty, coloring and painting, and even like sensory, putting just splooging paint onto a cookie sheet. Just things that are sensory. Let them do whatever happens, happens.
Lovely. Yes. Green. I'm so green.
Well, green is basically they're in comfort zone right now, so we don't want to force them out of that. We want to validate that this is a comfortable place to be, give the kid choices about what they want to do, what sort of activity they really enjoy, and maybe even take this opportunity to do your discussions and see where they want to be and what they want to do.
Charles, perfect. Perfect. When they're in green is when they can talk some rational and do some future orientation. There is no future in red. There's not very much except for the tragedy in yellow or green. Or blue. Because blue, depression, you assume everything's going to be bad. Yellow, anxiety, it could be bad. Green, comfort, that's when you can talk about some problem solving. But you get the idea. Somehow, it seems so simplistic, but so is life sometimes when it works. Instead of a name, ask them what color they're in, and you can have them come up with a list, or you can come up with a list for when you're not there. When I'm not here and you go into red, here's like 3 things. Doesn't have to be more than that. Here's 3 things to remind you, because when you're very upset, you don't remember. You know that. The more upset you are, the more stressed you are, the less you remember. So write it down. You can do cute little index cards that are colorful, or some kind of game, magic game, of saying, when you're feeling like this, here's some things you can do. And what you have given them is some control. What these kids have never had is control in their lives. Any element of a bit of control over themselves. Forget the environment. None of us have control of the environment. You've noticed that, right? But certainly some control of themselves. See, I told you knew this. Yes, Janine. Oh, so the idea of emotional regulation, helping people get some control. I want to remind you, anybody who doesn't feel like they have control feels like there's something wrong with me. It's a personality. It's a deficit issue. It isn't. It's a skill. And you can emphasize, well, of course you don't know. Nobody taught you. I'm going to give you some ideas. And again, there's a bunch of books. Obviously, I'm a book person. Please don't buy a self-help book and give it to somebody who didn't ask. That's a really bad thing to do. And besides, these are just boring. There's too many things. If they ask you, if you're dealing with a teenager, for example, this one, Don't Let Your Emotions Run Your Life, is based on dialectical behavior therapy. It is fabulous. But for a lot of times, you may come back and say, well, Skip gave me 2 ideas, but this didn't help. I need some others. So here's just some references. And you can look through the activity, and it's a little white lie, but then you can say, there's something, I do that may help. Let's do it together. So it's something you're sharing, and that makes it even more special and wonderful. So from little kids' favorite games for self-regulation, stopping the pain, anger workbook, and you can see all of those there. They're in Amazon, and there's others. Don't go hog wild and spend that much money on too many. But if you have a need and your kid needs some specialized kind of activities to calm down, that may give you some help. Don't ever give someone a self-help book, but here's some ideas for you. And depending on the age, sometimes a little bit of self-help is good because, again, it names it. The first time, there was a book that came out in the 80s called Adult Children of Alcoholics by Janet Williams. Remember that? It was amazing because so many people, they had not been talked about before, and people went, oh! Claudia Black, yeah. Amazing, yes, that's me. That explains it. It isn't just me being crazy. So part of it is information to normalize. You're not crazy, this is what happens. And then you need to, again, my emphasis, go back to the body and work up. Okay on this? Emotional regulation? The third tool, we went from body, emotion to mind, depending on the age also, is some mindfulness. You can't pick up even news, CNN anymore without people talking about mindfulness, because it really has become powerful. Some ways you can turn that into a kid, have them imagine a safe place. Whether it's a castle, up on a rainbow, riding on their magic horse, whatever, a safe place that they can put themselves in their head. Okay? When they're in the middle of a red zone, that doesn't work. But other times, mindfulness, body awareness, and this is as they get older. Find out where in their body, not what. Don't ask what they're feeling. Ask where in your body. So I'm going to ask you for a second, where do you carry your tension? Some of you carry it here. Some of you carry lower back. Oh, sorry. Just hit that. Some of you carry your hands. Have you ever seen someone with their shoes off and their toes crunked? I've known people who've gone home and they said, my neck really hurts. What causes your neck to hurt? Doing this. And they didn't notice. How do you do this for hours and not notice? Because we habituate to things. So a real powerful thing is where are you holding your anxiety? Where are you holding it? Some calming phrases, a mantra. As you get older, this too shall pass. Everything changes seems to be one that I need to remind myself. This is not forever. Whatever the situation you're thinking about is going to be. But there might be some other magic things. Always, kids love magic. Make a magic phrase that works for them. Ask them what phrase they've heard. Especially with movies. If it's a movie or a TV series, that speaks to them. Stuffed animals, great for kids, especially girls, but for everyone. Hugging them, holding them is so tactile. And there's a secondary level here. If you're holding your bear, okay, you're holding bear. Nancy, right? Okay, you're holding Billy the bear. And I'm going to say, Nancy, Billy the bear is so scared. Would you help Billy the bear? Look what I've just done. I've changed it from you being the victim and the underdog to you being the overdog and taking care of. And the kids will come up with some marvelous things. There's an old expression, you teach what you need to learn. That's why when siblings are together, the oldest usually does the best because they're taken care of. So helping them have somebody else, at least for a while, to take care of. Slight story to tell you the power of this. I had some foot surgery a few years ago. And when I was in the doctor's office before the surgery, because I was teaching at the time, I had to wait till semester break, I looked up and I said, Dr. K, I see you have some stuffed animals there. Do you treat kids? He said, oh, no, just adults. I said, well, tell me about the animals. He said, well, you may have noticed that those steroid shots hurt. I was like, yeah, I actually noticed that. He says, some people do better if I give them a bear Or if I give them, I said, grown-up people, right? He said, yep. He said, it makes a difference. There's just something, and it goes back to that attachment stuff that Dr. Jacobs was talking about, that tactile connection, physical touching, which we get so little of in this culture. So mindfulness, giving them focus. Yes, Andy?
When you were first
Thank
talking
you.
about stuffed animals for children, you said especially for girls. Why would that be?
We teach boys to be more masculine. So after a certain age, sometimes they get a little self-conscious with a fuzzy animal. But if you can get it for them anyway, let them throw it away. They like it. But even teenage girls will like stuffed animals. Teenage boys won't. They want to.
He has Mr. Dragon and Beluga the Whale.
Mr. Dragon and Beluga the Whale. They're doing better at coming out with some things. It used to be just the soldier dolls, but give it a try. You can get them at the dollar store. Have you been to Costco lately? They have a bear that is bigger than him, much less me. It's like, I don't know what you do with those things. I guess so. There's the mother I always wanted. Dang. Get one now. You've got the idea, right? So all of these are just helping them cope. You're giving people tools to cope with themselves and the emotions. And that's what nobody is given. That's the only thing we need. And as always, be careful with them. But here's some additional ones for you to look at to give them ideas. It's better if it comes from you, but depending on the age. One of the ones I just love the most, do I have it with me? Oh, I didn't bring that one. Sitting still like a frog. Most of you, I certainly have tried 1,000,000 times to meditate. I'm a little too hyperactive. So that's why I do Tai Chi. It's a moving meditation. But the kids take to it like fish to water. And it really is so powerfully effective. It means so much. But here's some different ways. Little peaceful piggy meditation, stress reduction, 55 exercises. Look through it and you pick up an exercise and do it with them. Then it becomes a shared event, something we're doing together, which makes it better. It's always better to do something with a friend if you don't have a wonderful yoga teacher to do it with you, and you can follow through. Okay, here's the key point, and I keep repeating. The key point I want to remind you is coping skills start with the lower brain. Not with the lecture, not with explaining, not with the head. Body. So that's why when I gave you the tools, it's body stuff first, then some emotion, and then maybe understanding. But people, if you ask people their advice, they usually give you the other side. They start giving a lecture and are explaining. When you're really upset, your explanations just make me more nervous. Doing things, movement, counting, grounding things, getting my heart, getting back in my body, feeling what I'm feeling, and then maybe saying, oh, that's what anxiety feels like, or that's what red. Okay? Grounding to reality. Yes? And I know you knew that because that's what you do for yourself, but we forget how smart we are. You do. All of that wisdom, all of that background, that's what's going to make you so valuable to this casa, who never had any grown-up care enough to give them tools, focus on them. They've been out there like falling, free falling, and you're going to be there. Just don't rush it. Another one for older children is journaling, especially about good things. If you are a kid in the foster care system, you were probably given a chance to put things, or somebody else put it in a garbage bag and took it along with you. You don't have stuff. Those of us from that background, we don't have childhood pictures. We don't have those kinds of things. So writing things down, when you go with them on an adventure, make sure you get some sample. Well, these days it's easier with cell phones. You can take a picture. But some kind of thing, and maybe have them write it down. And then if they're old enough, they can start writing about the bad days too. Journaling is a powerful kind of thing, but it's an age-dependent thing. But certainly you can get them started with some positive things. And one of the things, there's some coping tools for red, yellow, green, and they can kind of go to that. So capturing some positive memories, have them talk about what they're good at. I've just spent the last kind of track of time here, a little over an hour talking about all the problems. But these kids have survived. They're resilient. They're regular people. They'll have a sense of humor. What are some of their successes? And I truly believe celebrating their successes is critical. Now, I want to focus one other thing, and you started to talk about it. Particularly sexual abuse, but also emotional abuse. The child may not be ready to talk about it. Please don't ever try and force someone to talk about that. It may be the big rhinoceros head in the middle of the room, or the big back, but there's a reason for that. They're not ready yet. Talking about can re-traumatize until you're ready. But let them walk around it, if you will. But what I want you to know is underneath is the feeling of shame. If you've been abused, it isn't just the anger and the low self-esteem. I'm shamed that I'm that kind of a person, that even you couldn't love me. And shame is a horribly self-eating. So anything you can do to show them in their own eyes some positive aspects of them is so terribly important, especially with sexual abuse. With sexual abuse, there's another dynamic in here that I want to tell you about as a therapist, and that is what is often, not always, depending on the age and the situation, but what is often in there is the most horrible, shaming feeling of all, is that I was part of that. I didn't hate it. And everybody's saying how horrible it is. So number one, I want to remind you, bodies do what bodies do. That's easy. If you were a POW, prisoner of war, and I gave you rotten food, but you were being starved, would you eat the rotten food? Yes. That's the analogy. When someone is sexually abusing a kid, usually it isn't a rape, it is, you are the only one I care about, you're the only one here, the father, the uncle, someone, for a fake 10 minutes. But for a fake 10 minutes, in essence, focuses on that kid and says, in a rotten way, I love you, I care about you. Of course, part of me is going to go, yes, I'm starving. You're giving me rotten food. But you can't say that to a kid because our whole society, we understand about pedophilia and all of the rest of it. But that's part of what underlies some of the horrible shame. Huge correlation with eating disorders and abuse, especially anorexia. Anorexia is about getting body control. So you're going to hear kids, and you know today, things are horrible. There are websites that are called pro-ana, pro-anorexia, that will teach you how to be a good anorexic, how to throw up without making sounds. There's stuff out there, but it's all about getting control of your body. But back to the shame. So I want you to understand that these kids feel, and it's so horrible that you never, ever would tell anybody about it for years. Those of us who have been through some of that, of course you can't tell anybody because you're embarrassed and horrified that you're so different and terrible. And it's hard enough trying to fit in. I spent my whole early life trying to be normal and fit in. It's like, do you like that? I don't know, do you want me to like it? Then I like it. So a lot of times it's going to be hard to get them to come up with a decision. What kind of thing do you like? And you may have to say, I like hamburgers. Oh yeah, I like it too. And you say, no, I meant a salad. Oh yeah, that's what I like too. It isn't that they're playing you, it's they've learned to keep the grown-ups happy. And obviously whatever I do is not okay. Okay? That's our secret to know about. You don't shame them by even telling them about them, but that's the place where you approach with some care, knowing that we've damaged these kids, but they can be rebuilt. They really can. So here's my fifth one. Back to the reminder, celebrate some successes. Nobody celebrates enough. Did anybody give you balloons and bubble gum and all sorts of things for coming to CASA? Yay, you! You deserve it, right? So here's your imaginary gold star and your coupon for, I think chocolate is probably the medicinal thing for anything. When we had our CASA, my husband and I were co-CASAs on this, and it was a very tough experience because she had been prostituted by her mother at age 11. Got caught up in the system, the police system, by 13 in the system. So you can imagine all the issues. By the way, just fast forward, she just came to Phoenix to visit her grandmother. She's 26. We are still in touch, and she's doing fine. It wasn't all, yeah. So it does happen. More to her than us, but we were there. And she just said, you were the only people who were ever there. Everybody else left, and you never, ever left. And we're both very stubborn people. We never, ever left, and we weren't going to. But it was tough at the beginning. So we got into this little ritual of going out to Jamba Juice. On our way home or something from wherever we went, after we went to the movies, went shopping, did things. And every so often I will get a text from her, this day and age, saying, "Hey, Skip, just passed a Jamba Juice, so I'm thinking of you, sending love." If you didn't have a family, you don't have rituals and structure. Those are some of the celebration things. They're part of the us. But you will be the one to celebrate the wonderful things they do. All righty, 2 more things. Shoulders, come on, relax. You're almost done with me. I do want to remind you really can make a difference, not just the anecdotal data, like my CASA, but my CASA, I hit my chest again, huh? But all of the research says one person makes a huge difference. It really does. And the guy we always quote, Bruce Perry, that's him. He says, "For years, mental health professionals taught people they could only be healthy without social support. Unless you love yourself, you can't love anybody else. You need to be loved first to love yourself." That was bull feathers. You can't just love yourself if you've never gotten it. And that's what you're going to give these kids. At first, it's going to be friendship and stepping along, and then it will grow. I promise you it will, because you know that. But his book, I don't know if Dr. Jacobs said, "The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog," is some case studies of some of the most horrific child abuse. And again, the healthier the relationships are, the better the kid does. What you do for kids, what we do as CASAs, can't be paid for. This is the human touch. So important. Last reminders for you. I've talked about how to take care of your CASA kid. I'm concerned about you. Not because you don't have skills, but because you are walking into a minefield. You are walking into a dysfunctional system. There's no health with any of these people that you're going to be dealing with. And the point of a dysfunctional system is they try to pull you in. They play victim. And they're going to try and make you be the rescuer and do things. You're going to have to, if you can, make a friend with another CASA so confidentiality isn't an issue. So you can say, "I just have to tell you this." But know that. Know it walking in, especially the families. The kids have learned only manipulation. We can only do what we learn. That's the only language. The kids will, of course, try to manipulate you. Heck, all kids do. Come on. That's not pathology. That's what they've learned. But the families will. And that's where, step back, take a deep breath. You're not there to fix the families. Let the FCRB and let other people, you're there for that kid. But they're going to try and pull you. Okay, so when they do, it's not because you're weak or dumb or anything else. It's because that's what they do to everyone. That's why they drive people crazy. That's the dysfunctional. Okay? You knew all this, but this is a reminder. Because you've met some of these people. You've worked with some of these people, haven't you? They don't change, do they? Just saying. Just saying. Okay. So bottom line, one other bottom line. You are critical because you write a report that goes to the judge reads it. Your impact, but make it calm and rational and informative. Get a lot of information. Talk to the schools, talk to the parents, talk to everybody. Do a 360 evaluation of all of the people, and the calmer and the more data-based your reports, the more influence you're going to have on the judge, and that's what you want. You want to advocate for this kid. Because you really will, I promise you, know what's best for this kid. But if you come out there beating up on DCS, then you're just in a political brawl. If you come out rational with the report, you have a direct line to the judge. Don't forget that, so you don't need to play in DCS politics. You were great. Thank you. Good luck. Welcome to the family.